The Commerce Department tells me the Booker Washington Center misused state money granted to them back in 2011. The Commerce Department says Booker owed the state $200,000 of grant money. That, they say, was misappropriated by the center. The grant was supposed to be used for building improvements, but instead, they say the money was used for payroll. We also found out today from Booker's executive director, Jesse Bates, that the center still faces $150,000 mortgage debt, as well as $88,000 that is still owed to vendors. So with the funds owed to the state, along with the center's current debt, Booker is facing $438,000 that it must repay. That $438,000 is actually down from months ago, as they've been able to pay back $58,000 in payroll taxes that they owed to the federal government. This has been a long process for Booker, but they tell me they do have a plan to fix it. A year ago in July, this was the message.
Let's do what it takes to just make this a better, save our community center.
Booker Washington Center had just announced it was on the verge of bankruptcy. Everyone on the payroll was let go. It had been months since any of its staff or bills had been paid. Acting Executive Director Jesse Bates says at the time it was facing $300,000 in debt. The debt isn't gone except for the most pressing, the payroll taxes.
I think it was $58,000. That's paid.
Was there any other debt that you have been able to just get rid of off the books?
Nothing that we've been able to get rid of off the books. I mean, except for little minor things.
It is still facing nearly $440,000 in debt. $150,000 of that is the mortgage on the building. Booker has worked out a plan for that. It has another $88,000 of debt it still needs to get a payment plan for.
We're paying down the debt with mostly special events, what we've earned in special events, what we earned from sales of services, what we earn for rentals, that kind of thing.
Bates says Booker also plans to reopen its resale shop. Plus, it's charging fees for its sports and activities, something it never did before. Though it's taking donations, that's not the plan to keep Booker afloat.
You just can't go out there and say, you know, well, we didn't do everything right, but just give us the money anyway. You can't go asking people for money until you have that solid reputation that people feel comfortable with.
For your news leader, Rebecca Klopf, 13 News. Now, Bates is not commenting specifically on the Department of Commerce situation, saying an ongoing negotiation is underway to repay that misappropriated funds to the state. However, they do acknowledge that there was wrongdoing under the previous leadership. Sean and Kristen, back to you.
Now, Rebecca, really quick, what is the Department of Commerce saying about how Booker is handling the situation?
Yeah, they say Booker is fully cooperating with the state. They do acknowledge that they did something wrong. Their hope is that Booker can continue its operations in Rockford once everything is resolved. I filed the Freedom of Information Act and found a half a dozen pages of violations never corrected. The fire department says when they went to the Rockford Trust fire 2 weeks ago, no alarm sounded, no sprinklers went off on the flames. In fact, when crews went into the building, the fire protection systems they count on to keep them safe and help save lives wasn't working. The Rockford fire chief called the fire inside the Trust building 2 weeks ago very dangerous.
This is the first one I've seen in 22 years of this size.
Besides battling a blaze, crews faced extra dangers from a building in the middle of renovations.
The hazards in this building have an open shaft, say the shaft that went all the way to the floor, so thank goodness no one fell into that.
Fire crews say when they arrived, construction workers in the building told them about the open shafts, but they didn't know where they were. The fire department says the shafts were not covered like the law requires. Firefighters say they also didn't know important fire equipment inside the building hadn't been working for months. A fire department inspection report from May states sprinkler pipes at the Trust building were broken and the standpipe was out of service. Firefighters hook their hoses into a standpipe, which provides them a water source on every floor of the building.
Well, the big risk is we don't have enough water to put the fire out, so the fire continues to grow. And if we're in a high-rise building, evacuating people is time-consuming. Getting to the fire is time-consuming. Once we get to the fire, if we don't have enough water, that fire continues to grow, and fire grows rapidly. So the more the building is on fire, the more dangers that we run into.
Plus, crews say the fire alarm didn't go off 2 weeks ago. The fire department says it sent a letter to the Trust building's owners asking them to address newly found concerns with the building being turned into luxury condos. The fire department says some have already been corrected, like the open shafts, but it's not enough to make them feel 100% comfortable going back in if someone's life isn't in danger.
We are definitely going to take a lot less risk in this building than we would normally, because we do realize that there are not some functioning fire suppression systems in place.
Now, I did contact Morgan Management out of New York, who owns the building. They didn't comment to us, but the fire department says they are working closely with the builder to fix some of the code issues, and they are cooperating. It's not against the law to give raises, even big raises, before retirement, but the state says if the school district increases a salary too much, it's up to the district and taxpayers to pick up the tab. Now, in the last decade, Rockford schools have been paying penalties for these hefty pay raises, the most of any district in the state, not including Chicago.
We could cross it off.
Rockford schools have been paying more, a lot more, when it comes to its employees' pensions.
It's been $1.8 million over 10 years, which is, we certainly don't want to pay any penalty.
Any teacher, principal, superintendent in Illinois public schools pays into a pension system. That's their retirement. But some districts have been handing out big raises before an educator retires.
There's no limit on what school districts could pay teachers and administrators their last several years of retirement. So especially in a lot of the suburban districts, you had principals, superintendents getting 20%, 25% increases on the last few years of their employment, which drastically increased their pension benefits.
The state passed a law in 2005 to try to curb those raises. They say schools could still give out the raises, but anything more than 6% becomes the responsibility of the district to pay in the form of a penalty for the increased pensions.
A school district that grants a raise in excess of 6% is not doing anything illegal. They're not breaking the law. All the law says is that the school district is on notice that if they give a raise in excess of 6%, they are responsible for the long-term cost of the pension that's created by that salary increase.
Since the law passed, Rockford has paid out more than 200 times. Those educators saw their salaries increased more than the 6%.
The school district, though, is aware that the law is in place. For years, we have sent messages and policy statements to school districts informing them that if they grant raises in excess of 6%, they will be responsible for these costs.
So let's take a look at a recent example to show you exactly how these penalties are assessed. In 2011, a special education teacher in RPS made more than $101,000. If they would have received the maximum 6% raise, they would have earned $107,000 the next year. Instead, in 2012, the teacher's final year before retirement, they made almost $118,000. That's a raise of more than 16%, meaning the teacher's final earnings were higher, thus increasing their pension benefits after retirement. So the district and its taxpayers are now paying an excess salary payment to offset the extra money the teacher is receiving over the course of their pension. In this case alone, that's a little more than $25,000. In just the last year, Rockford schools paid $141,000 in pension penalties. Some teachers saw their salaries increase as much as 12%.
This could occur if someone took on an additional coaching assignment. Anything that could trigger by additional work responsibilities could trigger this.
Dr. Jarrett says the district cannot tell a teacher or administrator that they can't work. He says some teachers, before they retire, look to take on extra responsibilities to boost their pay.
We have to look at all of the different solutions that are out there to avoid paying those penalties.
Rockford schools say they're studying the issue right now. They plan to release a report in the next coming weeks on why it's happening and a possible solution.